Welcome to Designing Hollywood Podcast. I'm your host, Phillip Jr. Designing Hollywood Podcast is dedicated to all things movies and the movie industry and its talented professionals. Today's episode is sponsored by Fox Studios Costume. So our guest today is an award-winning and groundbreaking costume designer who has built a long and illustrious career working with some of cinema's most prominent filmmakers. Her collaborations began with the Academy Award-winning Oliver Stone on the biopic The Doors and JFK. She then went on to work with James Cameron on the iconic Terminator 2 Judgment Day and True Lies. She continued her work on Ali with the accomplished director Michael Mann, and then moved to more contemporary drama with award-winning director Alejandro González Iñárritu on 21 Grams. She has designed costumes for many other noted directors and producers on contemporary films, including Jerry Bruckheimer's Gone in 60 Seconds and Coyote Ugly, Joel Schumacher's Falling Down with Michael Douglas, David Dobkin's The Judge with Robert Downey Jr., Curtis Hanson's The River Wild starring Meryl Streep, Nancy Meyer's The Holiday, Phillip Noyce's The Saint, and Kimberly Peirce's Stop Loss. Her most recent projects include Free Guy, Top Gun Maverick, Uncharted starring Tom Holland, and The Lost City of D starring Sandra Bullock, Daniel Radcliffe, Brad Pitt, Divine, and directed by the Nee brothers. Without further ado, it is my extreme pleasure to introduce my friend and mentor, Miss Marlene Stewart.
Hi, Phillip. So pleasure to be here. And I've heard so many of these podcasts, and it's really a wonderful opportunity to have a great conversation about design and especially about illustrating, because you are one of my favorite illustrators and one of my favorite people to work with. And you know, design for me is really a team effort. It's not anything for me that I can really do completely alone. And so, you know, it's a pleasure to be here and to be able to have a conversation with you about this.
I'm very happy to have you here as well. You are one of my favorites, my favorite collaborators. I enjoy working with Marlene because she really does make it a team effort. But I also very much so, I owe her a lot of especially my early career. I learned so much from working in the costume department with Marlene, and we will get into that. But let's get started. I want to talk about you, and I want to talk about, we always ask the boring question, how did you come to a career in costume? Because you have a very interesting kind of pathway into it. So I want you to explain that.
Sure. Well, you know, it is interesting. I think pretty much everybody is unique, and everybody has a story, you know, that kind of fits their general kind of personality, I think, in a way, when you look back at it. I actually never really dreamed about being in the film business or even really thought about it. When I was younger, I did graduate from UC Berkeley and got a degree, and traveled to Europe. And as just sort of as a pastime, I started to kind of go to flea markets and get things and resell them in Europe. And I had always had a talent or an eye for fashion, and was interested in just on a personal level, but going to having an academic background, especially at Berkeley, one was never sort of encouraged to pursue anything sort of in the arts or in film or costume. It just really wasn't focused on in that school. So later on, after I had actually moved to Europe after graduating, and I did wind up getting a teaching credential, which I realized I didn't want to be a teacher either. So I sort of started styling and working with a lot of people in the music business when I was in Europe. And I came back to New York, and I started to attend FIT. I figured, well, I'm going to do something that have an inspiration for, you know, in terms of a vocation. And I really was curious to see if it would be a good match for me. So I went to school and learned the technical aspects of design, pattern making, illustration, basics, draping, and, you know, got into production, learned about the basics of the fashion business. And then I transferred to LA and finished up at FITM. Mm-hmm. And I started my own company. I worked for a couple of other companies, kind of, you know, ground level in the workroom, sort of learning workroom techniques, learning how to work with the seamstresses, how to deal with sample makers, et cetera, learning production. And then I started my own company and had 5 showrooms, main showroom in New York, and sold to most, major department stores and boutiques. And through that process, really learned, about fashion, sourcing fabrics, techniques, production, mass production, trends, color, working with colors, silhouette. And that was my background. Sort of cut to the chase a few years later, about 8 years later, in the fashion business, it's kind of always about your backing and, your financing, as well as if you're a designer, you're always kind of looking for that if you're not working for someone else. So through a series of situations at a certain time, even though I was doing very well, my backer kind of pulled the plug, so to speak. And I think they were more interested in owning real estate. So it was kind of a time of change. It was in the early 80s, sort of 1984. And the time one of my friends asked me, she was a stylist and she used to borrow clothes all the time to do photo shoots, et cetera, et cetera. And she asked me if I wanted to go in an interview with her for a music video. So it's hard for anybody to imagine this, but way back when I said, okay, so exactly what is the music video? Even though I'd done a lot of photo shoots with very big fashion photographers, whatever. It was very early days of MTV, the very, kind of beginning. I went on the interview and kind of long story short, I wound up working with Madonna.
Oh, that's it, huh? Just Madonna.
She wanted someone who could make clothes for her, who could, not just pull things from department stores, because even at that time, they really didn't have studio services. So
right.
She wanted someone that was going to be able to create a look for her and from scratch and do tours and whatever. So we began our collaboration, and I did quite a few videos of some are pretty well known, like Prayer, Vogue, Express Yourself, on and on, Material Girl. And sort of through a series of, another sort of serendipitous situation, that kind of translated into sort of an on-the-spot education about filmmaking, because the great thing about working with Madonna is not only she was incredibly creative, not only was it a moment in time that will never be again, because MTV was groundbreaking. It was a true moment for a new platform. It's kind of like a whole new way of promoting and listening to music 24/7, rotation, and to have the visuals and the design to go with it, on a constant rotation was pretty groundbreaking. So because of that, a lot of doors opened up for me, and I wound up working with a lot of other people in the music business at the time, doing videos. And I did get asked to do some movies with different directors. Actually, I had done a few other movies in Europe with the director who was on several of the Madonna videos, and her name is Mary Lambert.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a movie, for instance, Siesta, and I think it was 1988 or 87, with Jodie Foster and Grace Jones and Isabella Rossellini, Ellen Barkin, Gabriel Byrne. And it was a beautiful, kind of dramatic, one of those kind of Euro movies. It was a little bit of ahead of its time, but at any rate, one thing led to another. But kind of roundabout how it came about was I had a meeting with Oliver, and he saw my work in the music business that I'd done. And I think because of that, when the Doors, when he was ready to do the Doors, he asked me to design that. And I would say that was more my big intro into Hollywood filmmaking, although I did things like Pet Sematary with Mary as well, and a few other classics.
I didn't know that one. I honestly didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, and you even missed, what's interesting is the 80s are back. I mean, I did Space Jam. I mean, who knew that Space Jam before? Again, remakes of remakes at this point. But anyway, because of that situation, so I guess what I want to say to sort of sum it up, not that
Hmm?
it is in some ways, I never really sought out a path to be in the to be designing in the movie business. It kind of unfolded in an organic way. And I feel because I sort of view things as an artist, um, it's not necessarily, yes, it's very important to plan. You know, if you're a business person, you have to plan, you have to think, you have to plot and, you know, organize. But on a creative level, uh, I'm very much about an organic process of my own life. So whether I'm doing a design or creating something, and hopefully sometimes it does reach an artistic level, I feel that that's kind of the way my life has unfolded in, you know, in costuming. And just another footnote, you know, I have been a Buddhist for many years, and sort of philosophically speaking, it's the way you approach, you know, from a creative point of view is that, you know, to be in a creative mode, things organically unfold. It's not necessarily using your logical mind, because sort of what you don't know what you don't know, and if you
Correct.
only follow what you know, you instinctively recreate the same thing over again, or you know, it's not anything terribly new and exciting and interesting. So that being said, it's just sort of has been my philosophy. So I guess I kind of allowed that process to happen, and found myself in some really having some great opportunities to
One
work.
thing that I'll say is I have to say this because I want our listeners to listen, because she's telling you a lot of different things. Marlene's talking about the kind of inception of like kind of the creation process and the birth of like her career, right, as you know it now. But one thing that's very subtle in there, and the humbleness of it is that she did do a lot of work that led up to that point, to where it made her ready to be able to take on more and more opportunities. So the stepping stone was, there was the right amount of opportunity for her, but also there was the sheer amount of hard work of like learning all the different steps of the costume department and learning fashion, and then having her own thing and then kind of moving forward. So at every given point, it's, the best word is organic. It was an organic experience that just kept growing and being like, oh, I'll do a movie, oh, I'll do this, you know, but it kind of just led itself on a very natural path. And I think that that's the beauty for a lot of us when you think about like what you set out to do. I know for a lot of students, they're just like, when am I going to know when I'm going to know what I want to do? And you try to tell them, it's like, you might not ever know. Like sometimes they're like, how did you know you want to do this? I'm like, I'm still not sure I want to do this. Like, I don't know, you know, you just go forward. So she's just told you that from the course of that, and in between that too, you have fashion, you have photo shoots, you have music video, you have, then you're going into movie. She also didn't you design Madonna's wedding dress? At
Yes.
one point, right? So like there's a bunch of different things in there. We can't even go back. She's done a lot of iconic things, but in that moment, there's different opportunities that came, and primarily that's because of preparedness, readiness, and also Marlene studies a lot of different things. So that's just something I wanted to tell our, you know,
I
tell
think
our listeners.
what I will add, just, you know, really briefly, what my background from my degree, liberal arts degree, is really history.
Yeah.
So that's a key element, doing research, whether you're doing research on any subject, whatever it is. It kind of allowed me to have that kind of focus. And then when I went into, and I got another degree, or went back in terms of learning more about design, because my father was a painter. I have people in my family that are, you know, visual artists, shall we say. But I learned the technical skills and how workrooms, you know, function, sample makers, patterns. I really wanted to learn that and understand it, as well as mass production, because movies are about production, whether it's a small amount of things or, you know, large groups of things. So each phase or each area, I was able to learn aspects of the movie business before I got there. And then just even videos, being with a lot of amazing talent back in MTV days. I had, the opportunity to work with Academy Award winning directors of photographies and production designers. And so it's really about education and constantly learning techniques and how things are done. And because once you're presented with a project, it's all hands on deck. You better kind of have a lot to draw from. And it's better to kind of do your homework than to be in a situation and not be able to, to be able to know what you're doing, to walk into a workroom and to know what your cutter fitters are doing and how to drape fabrics and, this kind of thing, and how to have fabrics, merchandise and produced even, or where to access them, things like that. So.
And so now that we're kind of talking about that in terms of like just the process, I want to talk about inspiration, which is, I know one of the key things that we talk about on the show, we have talked about, everyone knows I love the history of it. And I love the fact that you can take something historical and conceptually turn it into something else. And that kind of breeds the inspiration. When you're just as you, what inspires you, or what films inspire you? Or like when you're just like thinking about the things that are most inspiring to you, what do you go to?
Well, I think what's very important as a costume designer is to really spread a wide net in terms of being exposed to art, to music is absolutely crucial for me. Music has been, a key element and a path through which I have been inspired. But, also I have quite a few friends that are artists that are, work as artists, and to be in another environment where I learn about, not only, historical art, but I mean, contemporary artists, I think is very important. So I guess what I'm going to say is it's all about not coming to a conclusion, but before you're thinking about something, but constantly opening yourself up to different cultures, traveling, being in Europe, traveling to all the places, being in Africa, seeing as much as you can, understanding culture, reading about it, learning about artists in different countries, South America, the Far East, just absorbing constantly and exposing yourself so that when the time comes, you have all the elements, as I was saying to you earlier, Philip, before we kind of came on the air here, to bake the cake, you know what I mean? It's kind of, you're just absorbing. So I guess what I want to say is that I, could be going hiking and learning from my friends, at the Sierra Club, like what's going on there with nature, because sometimes you'll be out in nature and you'll just be looking at plants. I'm pretty much vegetarian, so I'm around a lot of plants and I love to garden. But maybe your design is inspired by nature in some way, or maybe it's an industrial and urbanized environment that gives you inspiration, and you're in a city or someplace where the architecture is inspiring to you. So it's kind of just really being able to absorb, so that when the project comes, that focus of that project draws from all of the things that you have absorbed aesthetically, mentally, spiritually. It all comes out at that time.
Now talk to me, another thing that I've learned from Marlene, because she's very good at it, is we do these projects that are massive. And you've seen Marlene's resume, so her projects are big. They're big, massive movies. When we're working, one thing that will end up happening is that there's always challenges, right? So there's all these different challenges that come up, and there's stress, and there's things that you have to kind of figure out, and you're like pivoting and turning on a dime and all of that. Once that creation process is done, Marlene has taught me to learn to settle into peace, to relax. That's been a very hard thing, because you can talk about that a little bit in terms of how you kind of purge that project and kind of refresh yourself.
Right. Well, Philip, as you've heard me talk a lot about, after hours, I guess we'll say,
Mhm.
I make it a point. I have a daily practice that I do, sort of meditation practice, and I do yoga. I've been doing it for many years. Whatever it is, the old days before pandemic, I went to the gym, but it's really important, I think, to kind of self-care, nurture yourself, and really allow yourself to kind of empty, if you will, of all your thoughts. Because for me, creativity really does come from beyond the conscious mind. Again, not to get too esoteric,
For sure.
but it is really connecting to a little different level of awareness, if you will. However, everybody might have their own unique description of it. But that is where, I find renewal,
Mhm.
and also allow the cycle to happen. I mean, in other words, you work on a project, and I kind of like let it go. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like a plant. Okay, so if you're going to go in your garden, you're going to do all the work, and you're going to put the seed in, or you're going to put all these thoughts in, and then you're going to, cover it with dirt. And well, you can't really pull it up and see if it's going to be growing, the next day or the next day, because basically you're going to kill it.
Mhm.
So the whole idea is to do something and let it go, and it's sort of a practice that I do kind of daily, which I
It,
think is helpful.
it's something that actually helped me a lot because I remember Marlene talks to me about this a lot, at least in terms of just like, there's very much so what I appreciate is there's the point where you're on. So we're at work, we're on, we got to deliver, we're doing this. And then once you're gone, that fades away. Now, I know we're talking about Hollywood and everyone's like, oh, it's Hollywood work and stuff like that. But this is important for our viewers to listen to too, because there is that point where there is self-care, there's taking care of your mind, taking care of your body, all of those things. And I do think that that's a big part of it, so that when you are on, you can be creative. And I remember there's a moment, Marlene will remember this, but there's a moment that I remember was a shift for me, which was like, I saw me and my family ran into Marlene at the airport. And I don't remember where we were all going, but I was like, Marlene, like we just randomly ran into each other. Not only was it great to see her outside of work, because it was one of those things that was like, but I also appreciate it. She won't remember, we didn't talk about work during that entire exchange. We were talking about regular life and where we were going. And it was just a very natural kind of human interaction, in a way where it almost, to me, it felt like seeing a teacher when you're outside of school. You're like, oh, you exist outside of here? Like I was like, oh my gosh, we're not at work and you're still here. Like, so it was really fun. But what that taught me was to be present during moments when you're not working. And I think that that was really important, but also to have time to just live your life. So that's something that Marlene has taught me. And it's a constant reminder to be at peace, because again, we all know you'll be super stressed out. You're at work, you get off of work and you're like, oh, do I need to work? And it's like, nope, you relax, you take self-care, because it's going to come right back, and you're going to be right in that moment. You're like, oh, I should have enjoyed that time when I was off. So thank you, Marlene, for that. For sure.
Thank you for mentioning that. It is something I have to remind myself, but it's a constant, like reminder to do it. I mean, I have to make an effort, to do that every day, because I think also when you really love to do something, the mind tends to kind of stay in that place. But then there's also can be a lot of stress on a project. And then, talking about mental health, which I think is an important subject today, it has been, or we're having more conversations about it, along with a lot of other important conversations that we are just now having, that we haven't had in the past. We can't talk about them all today, but whether it's, gender or race or whatever. But I think mental health is very important in terms of being aware that is something that we all in this business have to be mindful of, is how to take care of ourselves mentally and on an emotional level, because the stress mixed with the overthinking can be a tricky road to navigate. And there's a lot of pressure always on movies, and demands, And part of, this business is learning to navigate that. And it's always, you're always a beginner. That's the main thing, a beginner's mind. It's like, okay, how do I need to learn to navigate this? Because every director is different. Every movie's different. Nothing is ever the same in life, period, but also in the movie business.
So my question for you now is, I think now that we've talked about that, let's dive back into a little bit of work. So you did the sequel to Top Gun. I know you can't talk about it because it's not out yet, even though it should be, because this pandemic has delayed everything.
It come out already?
I feel like it should have come out twice now, but can you tell us just a little bit about it, or just anything that
I would love, I guess what I'm going to say is I love to talk about Tom, because I've done three projects with him. I did a movie, Tropic Thunder with him, which he played one of my favorite characters, Les Grossman. I mean, he's so much fun. I mean,
incredible.
The guy is such an amazing, full-on 1,100,000,000% on and present. It's so great to work with, and totally 100% present when he's with you and gives it everything. And then I also did a movie, Oblivion, with him, which was kind of a great non-franchise movie, which I kind of love that idea. Kind of original piece.
Beautiful.
With a lot of amazing director, Joe Kosinski, and at any rate, when I had the opportunity to work with Tom, I mean, it is daunting to think about redoing, Top Gun. I've worked with Jerry Bruckheimer on quite a few movies as the producer, so I felt, confident. Although when I started this movie, I was actually on a project with Ben Affleck and Oscar Isaac and Charlie Hunnam, the Triple Frontier for Netflix. And I was in South America, and we were supposed to start, shooting and, come in for camera tests. So it was very nerve-wracking to kind of try to work on it long distance for some brief moments. But Tom is great to work with. I did work with another illustrator that well, Keith Christensen.
Keith Christensen.
And, the main thing I can say is it's an incredible ride. I did get a chance to see, a screening of it, and I think in the trailer that's out. But I'm just going to say we did recreate the Top Gun jacket, and that in itself is incredible. Because we got jackets from, I think, 10 or 15 that were made in 10 or 15 different factories in 1947 and 1949, and kludged them together in hand-woven patches. That in itself is a whole thing. But it's very exciting to work with someone like Tom, because he is, he's just such an amazing actor and gives it his all. So when you're in his circle, you can give nothing less, nor would you want to. But that experience it's definitely like being in that jet with him. I got to tell you that right now.
I love that. I mean, everyone that I've talked to that's collaborated with him, even from some of my friends that are actors or just other costume designers, is just a nice, super professional, and it's a whole moment. It's a whole process, but like he's giving his 150,000,000%, and everybody's delivering. I also will tell a little quick story really quickly. Was I think at the time that Marlene was working on this, we were in the same place. We were at Western Costume. And I wasn't working on it, but I was there, and I just remember almost every day her entire crew would be running around and working, and be like, and then I would just pop in and like, oh, what you working on? They're like, we're working on the jacket. Like everybody was working on trying to get that jacket. We're working on the jacket. And I was like, okay, I understand. But it was like, it's the iconic jacket. We're working on the jacket. So when you guys see that, because costume designers, the whole thing is to try and recreate these moments and also make it as iconic or whatever, or just make an iconic piece, but it's also to where it doesn't stand out so that it's like weird. So I think that you have to kind of recognize when you watch this, just know that a lot of work, it's not like Marlene just picked it up and said, here's that jacket, we saved it, and she put it back on. She had to do a lot of work to get it back there, you know? And so I think I just want people to know that when they look at this.
there's the original jacket, which is kind of, you know, and it was wonderful, but it's very 80s, you know?
Yeah, completely.
And so kind of, because there are original found parts from all these 25 plus jackets that we got from all over the world, you know, you'd have the cuff on one, if it was all raveled, or, you know, or the sleeve, mind you, this is 1947, so some of the knitting, the wool cuffs on the unraveling, well, that didn't work, and this part and the width of the plackets aren't the same if they're from a different factory. They were made in several different factories, so we had every single measurement down to the, you know, like millimeter on the collar, on the width of the band, on the width of the jacket. I mean, and it is kind of like a Franken jacket, meaning
it's many different
a lot of jackets put together. So yeah, so anyway, but it's going to be a fun ride. I think people will be pretty satisfied if they hadn't seen the first one. It's the photography is amazing. It's a lot of practical, you know, photography. People are used to CGI. Well, this is kind of the real deal. So it's pretty amazing. You know, for today's day and age, to see something real is shocking.
Right. So just remember, I wanted to point that out just for you to say, like, even hearing her explain it so passionately, it's not just a jacket. When you watch it, know that a lot of work went into it. I also want to tell us a little story for levity too. It's a full thing. But I want to tell a story about Marlene that was one of my favorite Marlene stories, which was there was a stressful moment. I think you were working on the Fast and Furious film.
Oh, yes, right.
And I was working on something else, and I was doing something for Marlene. I think we actually worked on that a little bit together, and I needed to come to visit Marlene. And there was this jacket. So like, it's always a jacket with Marlene. There was this jacket. There was a jacket. Now, this was a stressful day. We're talking like, this is pressure from studio, actors, everything. It's a really pressure sensitive day. So everyone's really kind of like intense in trying to solve this problem. Marlene had ordered this jacket from China. And when it got there, because it's from China, it was completely wrong. So this jacket is like, it didn't look like the picture. Everything, the details were all wrong. And this was like something that she wanted to use. And I remember Marlene telling me about it, and everyone was stressed about it, but I'm the only one, because everyone was stressed all day, but I just come into it. So she showed me the picture, and I just burst into laughter. And then, do you remember that? Like, because it was so wrong. The jacket, it was false advertising for sure.
Kind of like a litmus test, you know what I mean? It is, I would say in general, online shopping is a little bit like that. Having done 100,000 photo sessions, I guess, later, one knows you can always make anything look good with the right lighting.
Of course.
But it's kind of like that. Just buyer beware.
I just laughed because it was one of those levity moments where it was just like, you just had to laugh, and she laughed and everybody laughed, but it was like they were all stressed trying to figure it out, but then they ended up doing something that was great. So I just want to say that there are moments like that too, where you have to provide a little bit of that. But yeah, it's one of my favorite moments, because it was just like, she was showing me this jacket. She's like, look at this jacket. We just laughed about it, and it was so fun.
Take it too seriously.
Tell me about, because I want to pivot so you have time. Tell me, I said I want to pivot so you have time, but I want you to tell me about your most recent, which is Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds. So let's talk about that.
Another movie that was delayed due to the pandemic.
Correct.
But you know, Free Guy, one of the reasons I thought it was a lot of fun, I worked with Sean Levy on quite a few projects, and he's an amazing director. I think he really has quite a career on his, and has his finger on the pulse of a certain kind of group of people, especially with his Stranger Things. And we also did the series Night at the Museum series.
Correct.
But Free Guy, it was about the video game world, and what was fun for me, again, I look for movies that are different than the last movie I've done. I don't want to do all period movies, even though I love period JFK or The Doors or Ali, or even something like The Phantom, which I did, which was an early superhero movie done in the 1930s.
Beautiful.
I liked the idea of sort of exploring video game world. And as Phillip knows, a lot of his illustrators, people he works with, and are from video game world.
Correct.
That's really, 24/7, illustrating the whole world, whole worlds. And so, sometimes the set design, or they're used to doing background or creating buildings, and, it kind of is tricky to translate to clothing because sometimes clothing can be so specific. But what was great was that I got a chance to, look at Fortnite, look at all the, Red Dead Redemption. I mean, just check out all the video games, which is one of the great things I find about movies, is it gives you an opportunity to delve into a world and explore that world, whatever the subject is. So the game is about a bad guy, Taika Waititi, who kind of steals, he's the president of this company, and he steals the kind of creative idea, pays for it, but he basically steals the creative idea for this video game where the characters in the video game kind of become conscious and gain consciousness, or learn. I should say they represent AI. So as they're learning, they're getting smarter and smarter, and they're becoming self-aware. So this idea, in a way, even though it's packaged in kind of a fun movie, is a pretty serious and controversial idea. However, in our movie, it was really, lots of fun, especially with Ryan Reynolds being, that kind of deadpan, Deadpool kind of humor. So for that, we did about 100, I think it was about 120 different avatars that we did a lot built from scratch, and some we did, just downright mix and match, where we kind of went and gathered things from all over. It's kind of the pots and pans version, although I try to make sure it doesn't look like a pot or a pan. The basic rules of design is that if there's too many things on it, it's got to go. I'm a little bit more classic, but we did things, cowboys from the West, space cowboys. We did, I don't know, every possible imaginary, miner from another planet, saloon girls from, 1940s, and every kind of possible characters, as well as just, some without names. So it was really a fun ride to kind of work with different illustrators on that, and also to, to build the costumes.
And did you have, I know that we talked a little bit about, or at least the color palette choice for Ryan Reynolds, because there was like a specific type of blue. What is the thought process behind that?
So I will say, just on a quick note, my theory is if you have one costume, it's just as hard as if you have 50 costumes for
Correct.
As a matter of fact, it's worse, because people are so worried if this one look will be the right look. It's much easier to have 5 or 10, as per script, as most costume designers or people that do, work in the business know, there is an amazing writer somewhere that has decided that, this character is going to be wearing blue, kind of like 70s sort of blue. I think that was kind of the idea. And so, even though that's written in the script, what you have to do, and a shirt, okay, so what kind of shirt, you think of, to me. And it was funny because the director had given me, director Sean Levy had given me kind of a mood page from this movie, Falling Down. He goes, "Oh, I really like this movie. I think we should do it kind of like Michael Douglas in Falling Down." He didn't even know that I had done the movie.
So he's referencing you, basically.
Whoever hires you may not have any idea what you've done in the past. And that's after 5 movies. I said, yes, I know that character really well. He wears a short sleeve, long, white shirt. This is the ultimate guy, working guy in the 60s, white shirt, you see the t-shirt underneath, skinny black tie, black flat front pants, tie clip, certain glasses. It is the classic everyman look. So I think the idea that he wanted to portray was the everyman for the moment. And so, believe it or not, to get to the one shirt, I think we must have done at least 25 different kinds of shirts and colors of shirt, light blue, dark blue, like purplish blue, green blue, turquoisey blue, blue with a print. I mean, we have all these variations on it. And we went through, trying to figure out what it was. But that's kind of started out as prescript and then, kind of expanded exponentially.
And
But
Ryan's character, for some of you guys watching, if you haven't seen the film, he's an NPC. So he's like a non-player. He's like a background character. So the other thing that Marlene did with that kind of uniform was kind of uniform him into just being like, he works at a bank and he's just there and he's just the background character that always works at the bank, right? But as they start to become aware, it starts to expand. So there's some color palette things. I don't want to ruin it for you. You should go see it, but definitely just know that all of that stuff is purposeful. And even though there is a shirt or there's a uniform, a hell of a lot of work goes into designing what that is and how specific it is to make you feel something and also to help the character development. So we always talk about little things like that on this show. So I just want you to be aware of that when you watch it, and pay attention to the choices that Marlene was kind of making to make sure that that story was told through the costume, but also pushed back enough to where it doesn't become overbearing, basically.
And of course, it was all custom made, even though
Correct.
you look at the shirt and you go, gee, couldn't I have bought that? No.
Nope.
It's custom made, So yes, absolutely. So, and we did also design some sneakers for him and, the whole work. So it was a fun movie to work on in that sense.
Now tell me, as we're going through, because we've talked a lot about process, we're coming to a close. I want you to tell me what it's been like working through COVID, and also kind of further that, talk about just the differences, but also say what you think just the next generation of designer coming up can do to like kind of work on their craft.
Right. Well, I think, working during COVID, probably, I don't want to speak for any other costume designers, but it's kind of like going back to boot camp, if you will. Just we've all had heard of the different kind of protocols that were to be in place. In other words, people right away, it was sort of social distancing. That was something. But the very beginning of pandemic, when not too many productions were going on, the unions, as we know, were trying to figure out what these protocols should be for not only the Costume Designers Guild, but for every other guild and union. And when we didn't know, I'm not speaking as anybody that knows as an expert on COVID, but, it was all the worry or concern that that the transmission was through surface touching and, this kind of thing rather than being airborne. So at the very beginning, it was very difficult with trying to deal with surfaces and putting things in isolated the clothing and then having it be sort of disinfected, whether you're using ultraviolet light or just using space and time and isolation to make sure nothing was transmitted to another person. I think it evolved slightly from that level, thankfully, to, knowing that it was more airborne, and that was the bigger concern. So the meaning in general was, how do you work in a space? How do you deal with protecting yourself, wearing shields with actors, and along with masking. And it was pretty challenging, of course, limiting the amount of people that you had in a room, not being able to bring in more people for fittings, doing things remotely, very, very challenging. Fittings remotely, one of the more difficult things I've ever experienced is trying to do custom made fittings remotely. I mean, I just, was not my favorite thing. And that was a requirement at a certain point, when it was very, very,
When it was really bad, yeah.
difficult. But fortunately now, I think, people have kind of gotten a system and sort of know the routine. And of course, as people know, we were tested pretty much every other day, depending on what your group is in. But as a costume designer, usually you're in the main group of the actors. So it's been a challenge, but it's something, I think gives you power to learn that you can live through it and learn how to work around it. And it's not easy, especially we were in the jungles of the Dominican Republic shooting with face masks and 100-degree weather and rain and mud, and it was like being definitely intense in that environment, even more intense. But we made it through.
Was that for Lost City?
Yeah, that was for
Yeah.
Lost City.
So I'm going to say this really quickly because I'm kind of working with them now, but Lost City is directed by the Nee brothers. Shout out to the Nee brothers. They're awesome and they're the nicest humans. So just a shout out to them because they'll watch this probably, but I want to say thank you to them. I also wanted to say, Marlene, give our viewers, at least aspiring costume designers, what's something that you would impart to them or tell them to, you know, look for as they're kind of building their career?
Sure. I think the main thing I would say is, you know, to find your own, what you're the best at doing. I mean, not everybody, I consider being a costume designer sort of like being an architect, maybe because I have so many in my family, but you know, you have to see the overall picture of something. You have to deal with the finances, you have to deal with the design, you have to deal with the personalities. You cannot do everything yourself. I wish there was a time I could go and do, you know, fabric textile painting or something. No, but my age or dyers are so much better at it. So try to find out where your entry point is, that you're what you're really good at, and then allow your team around you to really get the best people you can and allow them to do what they're really good at. So, you know your strengths and your weaknesses. And I wouldn't say weaknesses, but just know what you're better at doing and then maybe focus on that. That's what's really important, because every designer is different. Everybody's good at something, maybe a little better at it than another person. And then you're good in this area. So as a designer that's moving forward, you know, really take solace and develop your talent, that what you love to do, what part you like to do, that really is your entry into the design process, and feel confident and allow other artists to work with you and to be integrated into the process and to be with the director if that's a possibility. Let everyone be exposed to the design process. Don't be afraid to, you know, don't hold on to it. It's a team effort. You're only as good as your team. And just, you know, if you work that way, I think you'll always be successful. I really do.
I want you guys to listen to that because that's something that she really does live by. Marlene has allowed me to do things or to come into part of the processes in different points when I was ready for them, to where I could actually learn more of the process or like see stuff, or she's shown me like, you know, how she does her boards and what her thought process is there. Sometimes I've been allowed to take photos for myself because I have to manipulate them. So I've been able to do some fitting stuff and things like that. So it's like really bringing you into parts of the process. Or I've even gone at some points and like pulled with Marlene, not pulled with her, but like she's shown me like what stuff is and what it means and like all of that. So I think it's one of those things that as you guys go forward, make sure that you're kind of learning and growing, and be like Marlene in the sense of making sure that you study and that you are focused and that you also find time for self-care. I want to thank Marlene for coming onto the show. It's been great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
The one thing I just wanted to add,
please.
a chance to really talk a lot about it, but one of my favorite points of entry of design is really illustrating.
Please.
Working with some of the most incredibly talented artists, and Phillip, you are one, and it has been a joy and a delight to just be inspired. And it's like back and forth. I don't, even though I've been in the music business and I'm around a lot of singers, it's to me what I imagine to be like playing music. You know, and you have this, I don't know if anybody saw Soul, but it's one of my favorite movies of this year, the jazz pianist, you know, and he'll play a few notes, and then the other, you know, someone else in the band is playing something else, and it's a whole like a jazz riff, you know, and that's the way it is on a visual level. And especially, you know, working with you, Phillip, it's like you'll do something and it inspires me, and I go, oh yeah, look at that, what about that? And you know, it's really just so crucial to the design process. And we're so lucky to have so many talented illustrators such as yourself, because you can't do everything yourself. I mean, years ago, I thought, oh, I'm going to try to spend more time illustrating, but it would take me a week to do it. And I never did learn all the Photoshop, but, you know, I never went down that road of tech, but
it's hard.
Is so, so fulfilling to be able to work in tandem. And because of the illustrators, the costume designers have been able to create amazing things. Not to say that hand-drawn pictures and watercolors are not all valid, you know, that other process, but you know, this whole new generation that we've had in the last 15 years or so is just really up the game in terms of really people being able to see the design and see the actors in it in just a format that's just so real, and inspiring, and you can just do incredible things. So thank you, Phillip, for all of your amazing help on all my projects and also your cohorts.
I have to say thank you. And Marlene has been a champion for shows. I think I just skipped it because I'm like, it's what I do, so I don't even think about it. But it's like the collaboration process with Marlene, and especially at the very beginning of a project and illustrating and looking at boards, it's that initial spark of the character. And it's really crucial because it's what kind of sells that initial, it's what the director first sees from the costume designer. And Marlene has been a champion for us in making sure that there's multiple ones, or like multiple illustrators usually on product that work with her, but we're also coming up with tons of different options. And she's like a sponge. She takes things and she's telling us stuff, but she also listens, and that's something I appreciate, because it does start feeling like a collaboration in the sense that you can go back and forth, or she'll show me a group of images and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That reminds me of something, like, have you seen this? And then we just start getting really nerdy and going back and forth. It's super fun, right? So I do appreciate that. But yes, that part of the process, thank you for saying that.
I just want to squeeze that in because it's so
thank
important.
You.
It's really almost step one. I mean, I'm going to say it's right up there with step one, like that great illustration. So thank you.
No, and thank you. We appreciate you. And I will make sure that everybody sees this. Like, Marlene shouted this out. So nice. So thank you.
It's really so vital and it's crucial, and to be able to have these relationships with your illustrators is it's like your right hand person.
Hear that? Do you hear that from Marlene herself? Thank you, Marlene.
Thank you.
I want to thank our sponsor, Fox Studios Costumes, located on Los Angeles West Side. The Fox On Lot Warehouse offers an extensive array of costumes and textiles from all eras and provides costume designers and costumers an opportunity to turn their ideas into works of art. I want to make sure that you guys are also going and checking out Marlene's website. It's marlenestewart.com. It's a beautiful website. It's very curated. She's done a great job with it. So I want you guys to make sure that you're following her career in that way. Check out her IMDb, although you don't need to. She's around. She will always be here. And she's done tons of really great things. Is there any other social media that you have, Marlene, that they should follow?
No, I'm just going to say I that is one thing I really, for those who are kind of on social media a lot more than myself. I do have an Instagram, but I must confess that I've kind of taken more of my time and gone into meditation than being on too much. Not as a criticism, it's just my quiet time, because it's a lot. You can kind of spend a lot of time there. So maybe in the future when I'm in between projects, I do have, but I just haven't had a lot of time to spend with it. So
completely understand. I just said the website's enough. So go to her website, make sure you guys go visit it. Because like I said, she has a really impressive one. And when you see the amounts of movies there, you will be completely impressed by this one, like we all are. I also want to thank producer and founder Martika Ibarra and co-founder costume designer Marilyn Vance. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you guys again.
Thank you.
Located on Los Angeles West Side, the Fox Lot Costume House offers an extensive array of costumes and textiles from all areas and provides costume designers and costumers an opportunity to turn their ideas into works of art. Since its reestablishment, Fox Costumes has grown its inventory, particularly its fantasy and sci-fi costumes. In early 2019, we started barcoding our stock and entering everything to our website, where you can order any available costumes and we'll ship it to wherever you are. Order at www.foxcostumes.com. The climate-controlled warehouse offers more than 7 miles of clothes pipe and over 1 million pieces of clothing. Fox Costumes and Wardrobe also offer the following services: alterations and made-to-order, fabrics, offices and prep cages, fitting rooms, wash and dye facilities. Thank you to our sponsor, Fox Studios Costume. Also, thank you to our viewers. Be sure to follow Designing Hollywood Podcast on social media and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube for all of our episodes.